everybody, welcome to One Set. My name is Anthony Irvin.
What's up, everybody? How we doing?
This is my co-host, Jim Green. This has been a year in the making.
It's really been 23 years in the making. Who wants to tell it? You or me? I don't know. Let's do it. What's up, everybody? How we doing? Welcome back to another episode of One Set. I'm Jim Green, along with my co-host, my best friend and my brother, Anthony Irvin. Anthony, how you feeling, my dude? How was your weekend? How was your week since? I saw you last week at your gig. So how other than the gig itself? Because I was only at the first half, and we can talk about that briefly too. How you doing, my guy?
Hey, it was a busy week overall. I mean, like I said, we had the live show for episode 10 last week, and it was a lot of fun. If you guys hadn't checked that out yet, make sure you guys check out the last episode, which is our first live episode. The next night after that, I had my gig at the Tom's Bar and Grill in Royersford, PA, which is a venue I've been playing maybe for a little over a year now, and I really like it over there. It's nice. It's out of my DELCO area that I'm usually prone to playing, so it's a new network of people, and it's been pretty fun. The people there are really chill, and they like most of the stuff I play. I know it's more of a country type venue, but they dig the classic rock and a lot of old classic rock country stuff that I usually play. But yeah, it was a cool night. I mean, the night started off a little shaky because I had some technical issues with my sound. I was using my other amplifier because usually I bring my bigger amplifier for that because it's a big room. So I want to try to project to the people sitting in the back bar. But I think my settings for my smaller amp were still on my pedal board. So either the settings were just a little off, and I was getting a lot of hum and hiss and everything. So it took me a little bit, but after I got going, I got into the rhythm, because usually that throws me off in my first little bit. But got into a rhythm, started getting into it, and the sets were really good. I really was really digging them for not playing in the last 2 months. I think the last time I was playing it was in January. So a little bit of a pause between the last time I gigged. But it was fun because the last little moment I was playing, these college kids that were sitting there, they were applauding and everything, like, encore, encore. And I'm like, I mean, really don't do encores at a cover show, but I mean, if you guys want to hear something, that's fine. And I'm making sure that the people in the back, like, as long as the venue, as long as the bar is okay with it, because they started putting on the music and everything for the jukebox. But they're like, no, they'll be fine. Just play something. I'm like, well, what do you guys want to hear? So one of the guys was like, play Free Fall. And I'm like, okay. So they're like, yeah. So that while I was playing Free Falling, they were all singing with me. So it was cool, and
Nice.
So I think it's those little things that, you go out of your way to, especially do something specifically for somebody at those type of shows. It goes a long way for those type of situations. So, I mean, when I have those situations at hand, which are not very often, I try to, at least make them feel important, that at least, okay, I mean what are they going to do, kick me out or turn off my music? Okay, then if not, then so, but they like me there. The bosses or the people that work there, they were saying they really like me and they want to continue having me there, so I appreciate it up there, and I look forward to coming back. And overall, I mean, the weekend itself, we had some snow running around here, so it was a pretty chill weekend for me. But I know you had a crazy weekend. You were saying that it was the start of your comp season. So how did that go, man?
Yeah. So, like, segueing, transitioning from your show. So your show in Royersford, I'm actually up that way on Wednesdays. So I was planning, because I wrap up my night around 9:15. So I was trying to get to see you for your last half hour. What
Yeah.
actually wound up happening was towards the was it the it was either the end of my first class or second class. My boss called me. She actually wasn't there because she was sick. She called out. She wasn't feeling well. So, which usually after I'm done teaching at 9:15, she likes to catch up and get like a progress report on how the night went, and then I'm there for a little bit. So I was like, okay, if I'm locking up right at 9:15, everyone goes home. I'm locking the door and I'm getting over to see Anthony. He's like 7 minutes down the road.
It's literally like, I think, about like 7, 8, 9 minutes down the road. It's cool. I never knew it was actually
far
that
at
close.
all. Yeah. Like when you get off that main highway to get up to Tom's, you swing left and you're like 5 minutes that way. I swing right and I'm 5 minutes that way. So
yeah, I think we split it that Wawa, right?
No, right off the highway when you get off the exit. When you go left, I go to the right.
Okay. I got you.
Yeah. So, any rate, she called me earlier in the day and was like, I can tell I'm getting sick and I think I need to, call an audible and like go home. Cause she was already at the studio. She's like, she was trying to rearrange the night. Like, because I was just running the night, but it's typically her and I teaching. But they had competition the upcoming weekend. So I was basically rehearsing dances mostly because that was the priority going into the competition weekend. What wound up happening is at the end of my second class, she called me and was like, hey, one of the kids in your junior hip hop team, I just got word that she tested positive. So I'm canceling classes for the rest of the night and for tomorrow. So she said, finish up your third class. No, I didn't even have my third class. That's right. Because people started showing up. She emailed everyone and said, the night was closed. And she was like, if anyone shows up, apologize for the short notice, but like we just got wind that there was a positive case and tell them that we're just closing for the night. And like I had a couple parents show up with their kids and I explained the situation and they were great about it. But I was able to get out of there 20 minutes before you started. So I walked in and I actually called you, right? Because
I was still like, getting done. I was just, just getting done setting up.
Yeah. And I was like, so here's the situation. I gave you the heads up like that one of my students had tested positive. I was like, do you feel comfortable with me coming through to see you play still? And you were like, yeah, man, if you haven't been in contact with the kid recently, you're fine. I was like, all right, well, and then I was able to come through and see, rather than the last half hour, I stayed for like the first hour and a half. And then around 8:30, I was like, I think we're going to go. What was really funny was I sat at the table in front of you and I asked, cause it was like two tables next to each other. And, there were two older gentlemen at the opposite end of the table. And I was like, do you guys mind if I sit over here on the end? And they're like, have at it.
Go for it. Yeah.
So I didn't acknowledge you directly because I didn't want them to know that I was like a friend of yours. Cause I wanted to see if I could get like a genuine reaction from them.
Yeah.
And then their food came out. I think that they had like one of the guys, I don't know if it was a girlfriend or a wife or I don't know. Anyway, lady sits down, they eat, and then the other two step out to smoke, and they were gone for a while. So I moved over and sat because you were playing, and I was like yelling to the guy across the way. He's like, you can come over and sit here. I don't know where I don't know what they're doing out there for so long. So I went over and I sat down, and I'm just having conversation with the guy, and I'm like, I'm looking over my shoulder at you. I'm like, he's all right, ain't he? And the guy was like, he's great. Like he was really like, and if he didn't like what you were doing, right? Like, he had no idea that I knew you. Like, he would have been honest, and if he thought you weren't.
Right. And after like the third or fourth time of you saying like, your name's Anthony, right? And I'm like, okay, I can see what you're doing now, because it was more like you were saying, to just kind of have a genuine thing of like, okay, I don't want to have him know that he's my friend offhand and get like a genuine, feedback on what he's doing.
And I'm sorry about that. And you don't need to edit that out. But like, again, these earbuds, like, there's certain functionalities that I don't know. It's hitting like play. I had another tab open with music. It's playing on my Spotify. It's playing on my iTunes. So I apologize that I just cut out like that.
No, it's all good. None of the music came through, so it's good.
Okay, yeah. So he was genuinely into, like, not just the one song that you played, but right before I was getting ready to leave, I acknowledged you. I was like, all right, Ant. And he was like, so you come out to watch him play a lot? And I was like, yeah, I do. And then I right before I left, I broke the news. I was like, I've actually been best friends with him like for 20 plus years now. And he's like, get out. I was like,
so you were trolling me the whole time.
Yeah. It's yeah, that's awesome. I've done that before at shows that you've played too, like acted like I didn't really know. I was just like a bystander or
something like that.
Just a regular patron of whatever
playing
venue that you're at.
Playing the undercover boss.
Yeah. It's fun because I can gauge a genuine reaction to how people take to your playing and stuff, and rather than, oh yeah, he's my friend, and then they feel like they have to be respectful and not like say anything incorrect. Like, it's good to get like a genuine reaction, right? So yeah, so with that studio, that my classes got canceled early on because of the COVID outbreak. That particular student wasn't able to compete this past weekend.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but so I went Saturday morning to watch. I had a soloist, and she actually wound up scoring first overall, and I was like so happy. She's a good kid, and she works hard. And then my nephew's final high school play was Saturday night, so I got to see him. And the thing is he's been doing the plays because he obviously grew up dancing, but he wanted to get into theater. So, and he doesn't have like any major vocal training background type stuff. I think he did the course, so he has training from school. But like, as far as acting, he didn't like do acting lessons per se, but his high school's theater program is like pretty great. Like, they're awesome. Their plays, the last two that I've seen, incredibly well done. But his role, because they did The Sound of Music, his role was a lead, and he didn't dance. It was all singing and acting. So it was really cool to see him really zero in and focus in on just the singing and just the acting. And
gotcha.
Oh my God, the kid, I say kid, he's going to be 18 in August. So I guess I can call him a kid still, but he's just wicked talented. I'm so proud of him. And the play was really well done. So then Sunday morning, I was back at the same competition that I was at Saturday morning. I had a group that went on. So I rolled in early, got to watch them. They did fairly well. And then I jetted from there about an hour and a half north into Jersey. Right. I had the soloist that I've talked about that I work with in Jersey. He had his first competition This weekend, the other studio I was talking about, it was their 5th competition. They started a couple months ago, so they've been on stage already.
Right.
So my soloist from Jersey, he went on. We got to watch a few of his dances on Sunday afternoon, and then we caught awards. He wound up placing 6th overall out of 40. Not too shabby. It was a hip hop solo, and the other 5 that scored higher ahead of him. And this happens a lot. I've lived it doing hip hop solos. The technicians that are just in the air, they're turning, they're on the floor. There's a little bit more depth and classical like ballet and technique training that's involved in it. So the judges tend to lean that way a little bit more. And like I get it, but man, my guy from Jersey, he dances just a way that like nobody else that weekend moved. So he did get acknowledged with an entertainment award because he's great. His theatrics are, his like facial expressions are also.
Mm-hmm.
He can't. It's not like he can dance and he doesn't have this up here.
Right.
He's got the total package, man.
I was gonna say great. He has that total, full package going for you. So it's cool to kind of see, and I'm assuming these kids are the ones that you're teaching, and then so you're seeing the full growth and potential in all these kids, and then when you're seeing the final product up there, it's got to be awesome for you just to be like, taking one little thing and then having them perfected week after week after week, and then being up on show day. That's cool.
Yeah. So they all the studios, they'll have probably 2 more months of just regular regional competition, and then June is typically recital time, and then July is typically nationals time. So that will wrap up the comp season. So we've got 4 months to make adjustments as necessary, right? Yeah, I mean that was my weekend. Yesterday, I actually had the day off, so I got to hang out with a good friend of mine nice. for a little while, and then just kind of try to decompress because the weekend I was running around all over the place. Yeah. So, and then today, like, just taught classes tonight, and they went smooth, and then I got home and I got ready. We are getting ready to bring on our very first special guest to the podcast.
Yes, we are. Yeah, man.
Did you have anything else that you wanted to chat about before we welcome him in?
No, I mean, I'm looking forward to talking to our special guest, our first special guest of One Set. He's a dear friend of ours. We've known him since high school. And it's interesting because we both have different memories with him, and we've recently talked to him about a month ago.
We went out to like lunch with him, right?
Yeah, so we got to reminisce on a couple things, and it was interesting how we both had different memorabilia stories with him and throughout, because he knows you on a different front, where he knows me on a different front as well. Mainly, knowing me and him, meeting through music. But I'll let him introduce himself and give him his credentials, but like he was saying to us, and he's known in the DELCO scene and DELCO area as the DELCO podcast king, so we'll be able to get him and you guys to know how he became the podcast king. So how about we take a short little break, maybe get a word from our sponsors, and we'll be back with our guest.
Sounds good. See you guys in a jiffy.
Dreamers are believers, the new single by Spoken Life. Listen now on spokenlifemusic.com, Spotify, Apple Music, Deezer, Pandora, and more. I know times have changed.
And we're back, ladies and gentlemen, and we have our first special guest on the podcast, Mr. Matt Kelly. How are you doing, my friend?
I am doing well. I'm getting ready. I'm on my little therapy couch. I feel like we're going to be, leaning back, going into the past, reflecting on things. I've got a couple props here. I'm ready to rock. What do we got going on?
Hey, we got to get the good vibes going. Got to set the moods.
Coming live from my studio.
I think it's pretty interesting because I didn't realize how huge the podcasts were until like I'd even say 6 months ago, which is like what, right?
Right.
I mean, Anthony and I, we watched the Living the Gimmick podcast, which is a wrestling podcast. And I don't even remember how far in they were when we started. Did we listen for like 2 years, maybe?
I think it was about 2 years. I think they were just getting close to 150 because I know we hit the 200 and the 300 episodes.
Okay, so if
we must have got in the middle of the 100 and 200.
Yeah, if they got the 150 and they did an episode a week and they got the 300, that's 3 years.
Right.
I mean, you and I used to watch Wrestle Reaction after Monday Night Raw. Like when you were living at the apartment, and how long ago was that?
Right.
I mean, did you guys get married when you were still at the apartment, or were you homeowners where you're at now?
We were still married in the apartment for a little bit, and then we moved into the house that we currently are at.
Okay.
Matt, do you still watch a little bit of wrestling? Or
I watch like the major pay-per-views. I mean, obviously,
Gotcha.
R.I.P. Scott Hall, big important.
We were saying that before,
but yeah, like I'll check out the AEW pay-per-views. I'll check out the Big Four with WWE. There was a period right before the pandemic hit where it was like 5 days a week. I was watching the AEW Dynamite. I was watching NXT. I was watching SmackDown. I was watching Raw, and then like every month there was a pay-per-view. Like it was pretty bad. What happened was that watching the audience list wrestling was really uncomfortable. And
it was so hard.
And then like ever since, it's been one of those things that like I don't really miss that much, but like I still listen to like Coldaholic every morning, so I know everything that's happening in the wrestling world, so that I'm not like completely blind when I walk into like the pay-per-views. So I'm not like, oh, who's that? Like I know who all the players are.
Right.
I feel like one day I'll get back into it. I also don't have any live TV option right now, and like I feel like wrestling is one of those things that like sure I can watch it the next day on Hulu, but like 99% of the fun of watching wrestling is like experiencing the moment with the rest of the world as it happens.
Yes.
So like any big moment that happens on Monday, I've already seen about it on Twitter or Facebook when it happens. So like it kind of takes away the only exciting part of wrestling sometimes is those like unexpected moments. So I have a friend who wants to split a sling account with me, and if I follow through with that, then I could see myself getting sucked back into just like kind of throwing on Raw in the background on a Monday night while I'm like doing other stuff, you know what I mean, and then slowly getting reeled back in. But I'm busy, dude. Like it's a big investment to stay on top of everything.
It really is, especially with, like you were saying, with all the, programs they have now. I mean, you got Monday Night Raw, you got NXT, you got AEW 2 nights a week, and it's
let's not even pretend that NXT is a thing anymore. That whatever was the goodness of NXT has been long gutted.
Once the 2.0 started, it just went downhill.
It was the perfect. It was the absolute, and I was just talking to somebody about this. Like NXT, I love that NXT 2.0 stopped using TakeOver, because then I can still say that TakeOver has been and will always be a flawless series of pay-per-views. There is not a bad TakeOver in the bunch. Like just a perfect, that was for my money, it's NXT's entire run and Lucha Underground's entire run are like two of the finest blocks of wrestling that has been produced in the last however many years. And actually I literally just rewatched a bunch of videos of this today on YouTube, because the 5-year anniversary of it dropping is this week. But do you remember my favorite thing that WWE ever did? Southpaw Regional Wrestling. Did you ever watch those?
I didn't, but
I don't think I remember.
I heard good things about it, actually.
Yeah, it was 4 5-minute shorts that Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows produced. And it was basically just like all of the people who weren't being used on WWE came up with a fake wrestling company from the 80s and like shot it on like these handheld cameras and made it look like an old like territory wrestling company called Southpaw Regional Wrestling. And like John Cena plays the host of the show, who's like a washed up news anchor who's now has to do like this public access wrestling show. And it was no matches. It was just promos, like nonstop promos. But it was like Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson played like the two dudes who are always feuding, like that you would always have in that stuff. So it was like Chad Too Bad versus Tex Ferguson. And then it was like Rusev played like the good American country boy named like Bartholomew, but he still spoke like Rusev, like thick Russian accent. And then his big like villain was Tyler Breeze, played the millionaire, and he was basically like a $1 million man type character who bought Bartholomew's farm and was going to sell it unless Bartholomew could beat him in a match at the upcoming pay-per-view. It was so good. It was so over the top and ridiculous. And it just like, it captures all those things that you kind of love about that like late 80s, early 90s wrestling, where it's like, yeah, like when every character has a job and an occupation and like they're just like ridiculous and over the top, and it's really funny. Like I recommend watching they did 2 seasons of it. The second season is also pretty good, but that first season, those 4 episodes that they put out are just I rewatched it all 4 today because it takes like 20-25 minutes to watch the whole thing, and was still like laughing out loud at some of the like improv lines and ways that they just nailed the tone that they were going for.
That's awesome.
I honestly do miss the network since they let it go. I that was the half the reason, you know, and probably 90% of why people had the network was for the pay-per-views. I mean, if anybody was still paying $60 for a pay-per-view at that point, I mean, you're living under a rock.
Well, so I even did this thing, which like I guess I could still try to finish it, but like Peacock is just one of the worst apps to like navigate through. But at the time with the network, I was very late to wrestling. I grew up watching wrestling as a kid for a little bit, but I tapped out in like 95. So I missed all of the Attitude Era. I missed all of the Ruthless Aggression era. I didn't get back into wrestling until I was booking shows, and a lot of the bands that I were booking were wrestling fans. So like I would hear them all talking about wrestling, and I started watching it on Hulu, and I was like, this is stupid, was my first thought. And then I saw Bray Wyatt for the first time, and I was like, who is this? Because like I am a horror dude. So I was like, I need to know more about this guy. So then I was like basically like hate watching, except for when the Bray Wyatt segments would come up. And then
his first 4 vignettes of his promos were
incredible.
Incredible.
And then I just became fully sucked into all of it. Like I was like, oh, I want to know more about the Shield. Like, oh, the CM Punk guy seems pretty popular. Like I was just getting pulled into like all the different stuff. So when the network dropped, I was like, I'm going to watch all of it. I'm going to start on the first episode of Raw. And then when it comes time for WCW to kick in, I'm going to start alternating between. And I got through like about 4 years. I got from like 93 into about 97. And then the network went away. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to try to figure that out. On
that's dedication to just be like, okay, I'm going back like 4 or 5 years, and that's the best thing about the network they had, that you can actually do that. They had every Monday Night Raw, they had WCW stuff that you can actually go back and watch a lot of those things and catch up, like if you missed it, you know.
I'm sure. So I've searched a few things on Peacock, and I'm sure a lot of it is on there, but like it was just so much easier to search on the network.
Yeah.
My favorite thing that I would do, so when the network first dropped, I was kind of living a very similar life to what I'm living right now, which was like a freelance, lots of part-time, odd jobs type life. And at that point, my biggest money-making thing was dog walking. So I would wake up at like 9 a.m. and I would walk dogs until about 1 in the afternoon. And then I wouldn't be needed until like 4 or 5 p.m. for like the people who needed like a second stop.
Yeah.
So I got really accustomed to like a midday nap. Like I would like come home at like 1 and take like a nice 2-hour nap. And I would literally just put my laptop on like a little dinner, like, you know, like the TV dinner tray type deals that our parents had. I would set my laptop on and I would just click into the network because they had a nonstop live stream of stuff happening. So if you didn't know what to watch, you could just click into it and it'd be like television with no commercials.
Pretty much,
and at the time that I was taking these naps at 1 o'clock on the network, they would always play these old episodes of Legends of Wrestling, which were like these 2-3 hour long, like round table discussions where it was like Mean Gene, Dusty Rhodes, like all of like the biggest names in wrestling. And they would be given a topic of like greatest managers. And they would just have like this 3-hour conversation about like the greatest managers and why they were the greatest manager. And it was like kind of soothing to like lay and listen to these dudes talk. And then I would just kind of like drift into sleep for a little bit. And then like they'd play like a clip and there'd be like a loud bang and I'd kind of like start myself out of the nap and then like drift back into sleep. And that was for like 2 months. That was like my process every midday was like having a nap, listening to the sweet sultry sounds of Dusty Rhodes and Mean Gene argue about like the biggest blunders in wrestling history.
I love it. And right before you mentioned the network, I was literally thinking about, oh my God, I paid for the network, like basically just for the pay-per-views, but also for NXT before it went on television because it was such good, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
do you remember? I was just telling someone the other day that one of the best things I ever witnessed was on NXT, and it was if you remember, it was the match between I want to say it was Shinsuke Nakamura and Finn Balor, and they were the opening match of the night. And the way that they did it was like, all right, guys, we're kicking it off with a championship match between Shinsuke Nakamura and Finn Balor. Followed by that, we're going to have a women's match between, Carmella and Alexa Bliss. And then, of course, the tag team champions are going to come out here. And like the match keeps going and going and going. And all of a sudden on the commentary, like, all right, we just got word from the back. We can't stop this match until we have a definitive winner. So unfortunately, the tag team match, that's going to happen next week. We're hoping that this ends in time for us to see that women's match later on today. And it was a full hour-long match that they just like the commentary guys sold every beat of it. Like, hey man, we're hopefully this. Oh, we just got word from the back. Tune in next week in order to see that women's match because we cannot stop the action. Like it was the coolest throwback to like how wrestling used to be in the 80s, where it felt real for the first time, where you're just like, oh man, this match, like they're going past their time limit. They need to get a winner. Like we need to watch this.
And Jim actually got me into watching NXT. He was really into watching NXT, and he's like, dude, you need to start like looking at some of these guys. And that was when you were just saying like the Shinsuke Nakamura's and Finn Balor's and Samoa Joe's and all Sami Zayn. Everybody was, just getting their pops from there. And, I think I turned on a takeover and I'm like, whoa, like people need to be watching this.
The first NXT thing I ever saw was just a regular episode of NXT actually. And it was a best 2 out of 3 falls match between Cesaro and Sami Zayn. All I remember was that there was a point where they collide and like, I don't even know how to describe what I saw, Anthony. It was like they did a full like 360 in the air that ended with a power bomb. And I don't know how it was physically possible for two dudes to have like that much control over their
Cesaro's
body.
a freak of nature, though.
Yes,
like
he'll do amazing when he eventually shows up at AEW where he belongs.
Where he belongs.
Where he belongs, exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
I still don't know how he stayed in WWE and they just didn't want to try to push him into, not even like he definitely deserved a WWE title run, but even just giving him more credit than what he deserved. Like, the dude could work.
Well,
but
here's the thing that never made sense to me with Cesaro, because I think that Cesaro could, from what I understand, they saw him in the same vein that they see a Sami Zayn or a Kevin Owens, which is like, neither one of those dudes is anyone that they're going to put the main belt on, right? But they're trusted guys that they can put pretty much any celebrity with and trust that like the celebrity's in safe hands and that they'll be able to pull a good match out of a non-wrestler, right? And it's like,
right.
But like, the difference is that Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens are getting TV time for being able to do that. Cesaro wasn't even on television for months on end for no explainable reason. Like,
No,
go ahead, Jim. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say it's because he was talented in the ring, but had no personality otherwise. Like, it blew my mind that he started getting steam and people had the Cesaro section signs, right?
Yeah.
And like the cameras were going to them. Like they were clearly like trying to give him opportunity. The guy, I feel like he's just so dedicated to the craft of wrestling itself that like he's not one to like have a character. You know what I mean? Like
are you familiar with Chikara? I mean, it's not a company anymore, but it was a Philly-based company. So he cut his teeth in Chikara, and Chikara is wild. Like Chikara is like, well, I mean, it was the owner. Turns out was not such a great dude, and it no longer works in the wrestling industry. But it was like G-rated, but like over the top lucha wrestling, and they would do some of the wildest, goofiest stuff that I've ever seen. And that's where Cesaro got his start, in a tag team called Los Ice Creams. And it was two guys literally dressed as giant human ice cream cones. So like their suits were like clown suits, and then they wore a lucha mask that was like an ice cream flavor with a cone popping out of the top of their head. But like, he would do stuff where they would like pull out a bag of sprinkles like it was a bag of thumbtacks. They would pour it out on the ring, and then just like anytime the old wrestling rule is, usually if you're the one that's putting the thumbtacks in the ring, more likely than not you're the one that's going to take the thumbtacks.
Yeah.
So these two ice cream characters would pour the sprinkles all over the ring, and then they would eventually get body slammed into it, and they would sell it like death. They would be flopping all over the place. Like it was so funny. And like, that's where like Ruby Riott got her start in Chikara as Heidi Lovelace. Like I went to a show. This was right before he made his WWE debut, but I went to a show where it was Team Lucha versus Team Elite. And it was just in like a school gymnasium in Harrisburg. And it was Phoenix. I forget what the dragon's name was, but it was the Phoenix and his brother, the Lucha Brothers from AEW, and this other Lucha wrestler that were all on Lucha Underground. And it was against the Young Bucks and AJ Styles. And this was like literally 2 weeks before the Rumble where AJ debuted.
That's awesome.
And it was
awesome.
And it was literally just like 200 people maybe there watching this match. And it was a weekend long event. So it was Friday night was the first round, Saturday night was the second round, and then Sunday morning into the afternoon was the finals. And AJ Styles, in like just some of the most brilliant storytelling, improv possible is like lucha ropes are really slick. Like they are super slick. So during his first match, he jumped up on it and slipped off. He botched. He just fell straight off the top rope. So the second night, the whole match, he wouldn't use the top rope. Like every time he would climb up and he would look at it and then he would step down and do the moves from the second rope. And like the crowd kept cheering for him to take a risk and get on the top rope, and he just wouldn't do it. And then, of course, the final match where they win the tournament of these championships, he climbs to the top rope and everyone's cheering for him, and he does like it was so perfect. And it's like, that's how you take a mess up, and then you're like, this is going to become a 3-day long storyline for the people attending this event now. Like
that's why he's one of the best in the world, man.
Oh my God. That same show, or no, it was the next year. They would do every year. It was the Tournament of Trios was what it was called. But they would always bring out like the big guns. And Sean Whitman, speaking of Scott Hall, Sean Whitman was like, huge with Chikara. He loved Chikara. He would come out and do like any Chikara event. And like I said, Chikara was super G-rated. So there was this whole thing where he was asked to be in a tag team match, but he didn't have a tag team partner. And all of a sudden you hear in the background like, oh, you didn't know? And all of a sudden Billy Gunn comes walking out.
Nice.
But Billy Gunn does the suck it. And Sean Whitman's like, no, dude. I know this sounds crazy, but this is the one place where they don't want you to do that. And the whole crowd just starts chanting, please say sorry. He goes, please say sorry.
Yeah, that's great.
It was.
You gotta love
times
wrestling fans in that type of way, though.
Dude, I mean, when you're just having fun with it, that's when it's at its best. Like that's the best time. And you got to shut off your brain. Like I have so much fun watching the Rumble because I'm sure you guys do the same thing. Like me and my friends get a bunch of sheets of paper with numbers 1 through 30 written on it. And we all throw in money and draw numbers. And if your number wins, and it just puts so much more fun into it. Cause then when you've got like some jobber that you know is not going to win, you're giving it your all though. You're cheering them on like maybe Vince has woken up that morning and was just like, you know what? I think it's time one half of the Ascension goes to the main event of WrestleMania. It's like, who?
I know. The Rumble 6 years ago. 2016 was when Roman had to defend the belt in the Rumble. He gets eliminated, so we know, okay, we're definitely getting a new champion. And it's like, it's down to Triple H and Dean Ambrose, and everyone's pulling for Dean. And we're all like, nah, we know that, like, we know Triple H is getting it, but what if? And like that's like the exciting part. But like, you know, even when it's like, okay, Triple H wins, he's the champion, we're getting Roman to beat him at Mania. Like, it was super predictable.
I feel like the last few years have been a little bit more out of the box, where I feel like, and I think it helps when you do the brand split, because you really don't know. You're like, is the Rumble build going to be based on the Rumble, or is it going to be based on the Elimination Chamber? So like, you kind of have like 3 or 4 people in your mind that you're like, okay, well, if they want to do the SmackDown title storyline for Mania in the Rumble, then it's going to be this guy or this guy probably. But, you know, if they're going to the Raw story, it could be this guy and this guy. So you're kind of paying attention to like your 4 main picks. But I feel like every Rumble, there's always at least one person in there who you know has been kind of like the mid-card guy that you always feel like could be a main eventer. And they're in there for so long that there's like that little part of you that's like, ooh, yeah, is this the moment? Are they about to elevate this guy to the next tier? Because that would be amazing. And that's all I want. I just want 1 year where they really do just take a risk. You know what I mean? Like I would love for the year that like a Sami Zayn or a Kevin Owens wins the Rumble, because it would be so out of left field, but it also
a lot
be
of
like,
people thought KO was going to win.
Yeah, you're just like, you know what? Hell yeah, it's about time. Let's do this.
Right.
Well, I mean, and the big one for me, and look, I mean, Anthony and I did our Rumble picks. What was it, like episode 5? I don't know how many weeks ago it was. It was one of the
5 or 6
earlier
like
episodes, 4, 5, or 6. And I made my picks like for who I thought was going to win the Rumble, and I was like, I think Ronda Rousey's returning, and they're going to do that because there were talks that she was back training again, and then I was like, I think Brock is going to lose the belt and then enter the Rumble, and then and like it was.
Yeah, you nailed it.
He was 100% on that night.
My buddy Dylan, my buddy Dylan, he didn't want to spoil anything for anybody. So all he did was write down his guesses on a sheet of paper and he put it underneath the television. and then it was like, as soon as Ronda Rousey won, he just pulled the slip of paper out and held it up in the air, just so like Ronda Rousey to win. And then he pulled out the next one that said like Brock will win.
It was too predictable this time around, man. I would
say for me, I was like, it wasn't predictable until the second Brock's music hit, and then I was like, well, I know where this is gonna go.
Yeah.
Once he got in there, you knew. I'm like, okay, well, that's pretty much your winner there.
Yeah.
I didn't necessarily see that they were. I didn't think, only because I thought that they were going to say, okay, we're not going to do title versus title unification. Like, I didn't think that they were going to do that. Like, I kind of saw where like they could do it, but I was like, well, no, because they need to have the one belt to elevate one of the other matches on the card. I didn't think that they were just going to go all in on that match. But
I'm okay with it.
I'm not mad about it.
I'm not mad about it.
I've been saying since the very first brand split that the dumbest thing that they did was like, well, now we have a Raw women's and a SmackDown women's title, and we have a Raw tag team, and I think that there should be tag team women's, and then a general belt, and then you can have like the brand specific belt could be like Intercontinental is exclusively a SmackDown belt, and like US title is exclusively a Raw belt. But then I think if you're the tag team champion, the women's champion, or the like overall WWE
champion,
you float between both shows. You're doing double duty, and it's anybody's chance to get that belt. Like that's 100%. Just compelling storytelling then, because it's anybody's game.
There's more variables to play with there. Yeah,
there's more variables, especially because it's like you can't do the. I am all for, like, NXT specifically was at a point where they could have done some amazing stuff with a women's tag team belt. But like, you brought up you had a women's tag team belt at a time where like your roster had about 12 women on it. Like, it didn't make any sense to introduce that belt with such a thinned out roster. Like, it was just there were so many weird changes, and I was literally venting to my friend Dylan about this the other day. Like, the most frustrating thing right now with watching WWE is that based on pure talent, they have the best roster in any wrestling company. They have the best people they could be working with. They have some of the best writers they've ever had. It's just I would say 1 to 2 people up top making these wild last second calls, and it's just like, dude, Vince, just sell the company. Like, I get it, your heart's not in this anymore. Like, sell it to someone who is, because whatever the ideas that he thinks are going to work are, they haven't been working. They haven't been compelling. Like, I almost hate that I haven't watched Raw for 2 years and haven't missed it. I should be like, man, I can't believe I'm missing all this great action, but I don't feel like I'm missing a damn thing.
That's what we felt the last couple of months. Like, we stopped watching Raw, and like we just were, like you said, like when we didn't watch it, we're like, we don't really feel bad about missing it because we didn't feel like we missed anything.
There's plenty of channels that'll fill they'll tell you the 3 hours that you could have watched in 15 minutes the next morning, and you're like, got it. Okay.
And we talked about this on previous episodes, but the fact is, like, there's nothing compelling to keep you or want you to watch it. Just like in the Attitude Era, there was always something every week to make you want to watch the show, where now it's like either it's predictable or there's nothing that's drawing you to watch the show. There's nothing other than being like, okay, we're just going to bring back legends that were back from so-called era, or to bring back in views, because the roster we have now, we don't feel is bringing up the views. So we're just going to keep on bringing back legends. That works to an extent until you start saying, like, okay, well, I see what they're doing now. So it's like they're not, and you can say that it's all creative, but then I was thinking the same. I was talking to Jim about this a couple days ago, is the fact that because we were watching Vince McMahon on the Pat McAfee show, and saying the fact that, when he was talking a lot about the company and everything, you got to think, sometimes, or maybe it was the Brock episode, that he was saying that there's got to be somebody that has to step up. And that's the thing, like they're I mean, other than like Roman and all the guys that are on the top tier, but there's nobody that's trying to outdo themselves and say, hey, how do I get people in the stands?
I'm gonna disagree with you. I was gonna say it's a two-way street right now, because it seems like the people who do try to voice their opinions are all released now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I don't think
the other side of the circle too.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is like I've heard, and I realize I'm kind of probably just parroting something else that was said on Codeaholic, but like the days of like you just being able to walk into Vince's office and pitching him an idea to show you how passionate you are about it are gone. So it's like,
go away, buddy.
You can't talk to the main guy in charge to get a better chance at things. You're not allowed to do off the script promos. You're not allowed to this isn't something I would write about.
Yeah,
like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, and then you look at what's happening on AEW, like the few times that I've watched AEW, which again is like only really pay-per-views, but like you have a dude like MJF go out there and you're like, this guy is not reading off a script. This dude is pulling straight from his dome, and you can feel that energy, and you can feel the difference between someone who's speaking straight from here and using their wrestling mind to create words, and someone who's trying to just like remember the bullet points that they were handed 5 minutes before they walked out there.
The Eddie Kingston promo with CM Punk that one time, I haven't heard a promo like that in a while. And again, going back to what I just said, I don't even know this guy. I mean, I to the point where I know a lot of people do, but I mean, there's a couple people in the AEW that I'm like, I'm not too on the shelf of, but I'm like, I turned it on and I saw CM Punk. I'm like, I know CM Punk, but I'm like, okay, Eddie Kingston, I've heard the name, but let me just, step in and see what this guy's all about. And he's cutting that promo. I'm like, okay, let me turn this up a little bit. He's starting to, say a little something, and then he's getting into it. And I'm like, okay, this is about to go down. Like, it made me want to watch.
Yeah. Well, and that's, I mean, and I know that this is like the same opinions that people have had for the last 5 years.
Right.
Like, we were just talking about how great NXT was. And like, you just have to look at any person's call up from NXT and what happens when like they go from a place where they kind of had control over their character to someone who doesn't want them to have control over their character. Like, Tyler Breeze should have been a superstar. He was great in the ring. He was charismatic. He was funny. That character was fully fleshed out. Like, there was so much good about it, and they just didn't know what he was. So they gave him like a 2-week push, and then we're like, he's not working. And then just like threw him into like the opening act before Raw goes on television slot. Like, and you saw it happen with the Ascension. You saw it happen with Killer Cross. Like, all of these dudes were just like, how do you drop the ball this hard? How is Finn Balor not like the top baby face in WWE? You know,
because he got injured when they put the Universal strap on him, and they were like, injury prone.
Get him out of here. Yeah.
I mean, how do you
brought up Killer Cross?
How do you screw up? Like, this is going to be really salty, but like, how do you screw up Big E's championship run? And now the dude might have to retire. Like, this is like, how do you fumble that? Like, he's nothing but a powerhouse with charisma. Like that should be the easiest home run.
And here's my thing. They had the belt on Bobby Lashley for as long as they did. And then they put it on Big E finally. Granted, it was a cash-in. But Bobby Lashley is boring as fuck, okay? But you're going to let Big E lose the belt in how long? Like that baffled me.
And he barely got a chance to like do anything. You never saw him win.
Yeah.
I mean, you said Killer Cross, and that was literally the one that was on my mind. I was like, how?
I was just thinking of that too.
Like, why did they put the pyramid head helmet on him?
Was so stupid.
And then how did you not bring Scarlett out with him? I mean,
also, you even look at the tag division. How did you screw up American Alpha? How did you screw up? You know, I mean, like, how did you screw up? God, I can't even remember what their names are now because I think of them as FTR. But like the
Revival,
the Revival. How do you screw up the Revival? Like literally. American Alpha and the Revival were stealing matches in NXT. Like you would watch takeovers and you'd be like, and I'm not even that big on tag team wrestling, but you'd be watching it and be like, yo, these guys are stealing the show right now. And then they get moved to the main roster and they're given 2 minutes to try to wow a crowd that doesn't know who they are with no build. Like how are you supposed to win in that?
And the thing is Vince is not for tag teams, and that's why the tag division on the main roster is trash all the time.
He's not for tags. He's not for women wrestling. He's not for cruiserweights.
Clearly they had the whole.
205 Live was like some of the best stuff that they were producing, but no one was watching it. Like it was. It's been a fumble the whole time. He literally. No one misses the 80s more than Vincent Kennedy McMahon. That dude.
I was just going to say, like, he is trying to hold on to the buff,
the mega power
dudes so much that he's like, and I think that's why we don't see, the Finn Balor's, the Ricochets, and a lot of those guys that should be at the top level and be main eventing, because he doesn't feel that like the style of that is not necessarily marketable, but like he's still, like you said, he's still in that like muscle and everything else before stylistic stuff, and again there's two-way street with it, but it's just his mindset that he can't get out of that.
So Orange Cassidy has all the power to be the most iconic wrestler of the 2020s. Like, I genuinely believe that. If he was in WWE, Vince wouldn't know what the hell to do with this guy.
No.
He'd be sitting in catering. Let's be serious.
Like he'd be hoping that someone gets injured and has to get called in. Like
he'd be running around with the 24/7 champion trying to catch that damn belt.
Yeah. And it's like he is so funny and does so little, but is like also incredible. Like watching the things that he does with his hands firmly in his pockets is absolutely astounding to me.
The gentle kicks, kicks.
It kills.
Yeah.
Do we want to talk about other stuff besides wrestling?
I mean, I think we could go on and on about it. I just wanted to acknowledge real quick, Buddy Murphy versus Mustafa Ali.
Yep.
God, they had such fantastic matches. And then I think my favorite to date NXT match is actually Johnny Gargano versus Andrade in Philly on that Philly takeover. That was I've watched that back multiple times.
There's so many good takeover matches.
And Matt, I just wanted to get your take. And we'll get out of wrestling after this, I think, unless if we don't. But what did you think about how they introduced Adam Cole and then they had the Daniel Bryan debut directly after? Do you think that there's a problem with that? Like they should have separated them, or were you okay with it?
So as me not watching AEW and just watching the pay-per-views, it got a reaction out of me. I was like, oh,
sure.
shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that was like, oh, like this is. It was the first time it was like, oh, the war is happening. Like the shots have officially been fired. I think they did something really, really smart in the most recent one where it's like, because I don't count the William Regal appearance as like an authentic, like, hey, we've signed these new talents type thing. I think it was time AEW ended a pay-per-view where they didn't have some big out of nowhere like crossover debut. Like it was very much just down the middle. These are our guys. This is their pay-per-view. Because that was really like I was getting to the point where I was just expecting it every single pay-per-view. Like I was like, all right, when's like the big WWE dude showing up? Like so I think it was time that they broke that. And I'll just throw this out there. I think my favorite match that I've ever watched, especially in the last 10 years, was the very first Cruiserweight Championship thing where they did like a 3-day thing on the network. And it was the very first time that WWE had Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa wrestle each other. And it was when they were still tag team partners and friends. And it was such a well done emotional match because you're literally watching at this point two dudes who love each other, but also want to win this tournament, just brutalizing each other. And there's so many moments that have that like it almost has that Shawn Michaels, like, I'm sorry, I love you moment in both of their eyes throughout the entire match. So if you haven't seen that one, because man, did they do those matches to death after a while. There was always a chance for Johnny and Tommaso to go at each other. But that very first match on the network, I remember being magical to me.
Yeah, I know they did the Cruiserweight tournament, and then I remember someone coming up at ringside and handing Triple H the black sack, and then he ripped out the purple belt from it, and I was like, yes, they're gonna make something of the Cruiserweight division. And then Vince was just like, I'm gonna take a giant dump on that too because it wasn't my idea, you know.
So many good dudes that came out of that tournament too. It was unbelievable.
And it's exactly what we were just talking about. Vince is just trapped in the 80s with the big guys, and he's like, anything else that's not making me money, like they can go over to other promotions. And I'm just like, I just want to watch good wrestling. And if you're smaller and have agility and can move and like,
give me a good David and Goliath story. I'm all for it. I'm all for a little agile dude going up against a big, strong guy. Like,
I mean, how many small guys have won the big one other than like Rey Mysterio, which like that was fantastic. Like everybody was down with that.
Happened because of a tragedy. That would have never happened if not for Eddie's death, which is upsetting and unfair.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Okay, enough wrestling talk.
I think we've got our wrestling, fill in there. Yeah, I don't think we expected to go that far, but yeah, I mean,
we just follow where the story goes, right?
Yeah.
So,
but Matt, I mean, our whole thing was the fact that you were known as the Delco podcast king.
and wait, I gotta zero back here because I don't think that I mentioned this on a previous episode. I was at the dentist getting a cleaning done. And I think Anthony was right before we were getting ready to film our first episode. And I was like, my buddy Anthony and I are getting ready to start up a podcast. And I forget if it was this first. I think it was. I think I mentioned podcasts, and she said, "Oh, do you know Matt Kelly?" And I was like, "Yeah." I mean, I went to high school with him. He graduated a year before me. He's like, or not he. She said, "Oh yeah, like he's like kind of the podcast king of Delaware County." I was like, "I know he does podcasts, but like." Again, I'm just getting into the pod world like quite a bit. But I mentioned something about Anthony and fishing. Oh, I think we were going fishing too. She was like, wait a minute, Anthony Irvin? I was like, yeah, you know him? She goes, my husband's been fishing with him before.
Yeah.
So I was like, no way. I'm getting my teeth cleaned. This girl knows who Matt Kelly is, and she knows who Anthony is via her husband fishing with him. It was just like a really small world kind of moment. But again, I got into the podcast world just through the wrestling podcast, which I think is how we got into the wrestling talk. But Anthony and I, after that one ended, got into Two Bears, One Cave with Tom Segura and Bert Kreischer. And then we've basically just been spidering out from there. So, Matt, I know you have the horror movie podcast that actually my buddy Matt Holland
very active in our Facebook group. Yeah.
Well, he's a super horror movie buff.
Yes.
He and admittedly, I'm not very into horror movies. He invited me in, and I follow up on some stuff, but that's not my area of expertise by any means. Like, my parents weren't into it, so I wasn't raised with it. And I never went out of my way for it. I can tell you some of the ones that I had seen. I dated someone who was very, very into horror movies, and actually my current girlfriend is super into horror movies as well. Like, she's got me to watch a few things, and we could talk about those too. But Matt, we actually wanted to get your take on like how you got into the podcast world, like how you were introduced and how you transitioned in and where you started and how quickly that you took off with it.
So, I mean, I honestly think it weirdly starts all the way back in high school in a weird way. Because I think in high school, as both of you knew, I was like Mr. TV Studio, right?
Yes.
Like, I think anybody who thought of the TV studio, they would think me. I was in there first thing in the morning. I was there after school. I was usually renting cameras. And then even after high school, I was at, I just loved conversation. I loved it so much. And I was just obsessed with like capturing conversation. And that's why I had such a draw to film. I wanted to make movies. I wanted to write scripts. Kevin Smith was like a god to me because I was like, this dude's writing movies where people talk like people talk. Like it's not like this weird, like, oh, I must save the day. Like, it's just like two dudes just hanging out talking about comic books. And I'm like, you can make movies like that? Like, you can write things that are just conversational. And that was mind blowing to me. So I always had my camera with me. And Anthony, I know you experienced this firsthand, but like when there were shows happening in Delaware County, I was always there, camera in hand. I was documenting every performance. I would just interview people about the shows. We would go out to like Tom Jones and I would just film
so
the
many
dinner.
Tom Jones nights.
Yeah, like I was always documenting stuff. And this was before I knew what a podcast was. I mean, I guess in my brain I was like, maybe I'll be a documentary filmmaker. Like, I didn't really know what was going on, but I knew that was like, I was drawn to like capture conversation. Like, that was like really exciting to me, and capture like a moment in time. And then I was in college. It was my sophomore year, and I got my first laptop. I had Mac desktops pretty much as soon as I was in high school because they were great for editing. And I had a connection with a Apple store where someone could get me their employee discount on a laptop. So they got me a brand new laptop for a really good price. And I don't know how I had heard of podcasting, but on iTunes was a podcasting tab. And I was like, oh, let me check out this podcasting thing that I've heard of. And like, I subscribed to a couple shows. Only one of them I still listen to, which was Geekscape. I've looked at, and at the time there was like maybe 30 podcasts in the world. So like there wasn't a lot going on there. So I subscribed to a bunch of different podcasts that were like tied to like movies or music. And I just happened to find this Geekscape show, and they were only 3 episodes into their show. And I'm watching the host of this show interviewing his friend. And very quickly, from context clues, I picked up that they were both music video directors and that they liked the same music that I did, because they were referencing like the Get Up Kids and like all of these bands. And they kept talking about LA. So I'm like, all right, they're living in LA. They like this type of music video directors. Got it. I'm enjoying the conversation. And then he brings up this band, Don't Look Down. And like, Don't Look Down was a local punk band. Like, they were a Philly punk band, but like, they were like racing kites. You know what I mean? Like, they weren't on a major label. They very rarely played outside of like the main, like they definitely toured the United States, but it was clear that like where people went to see them was in the Philadelphia area. So then like, the obsessive compulsive person I am, I'm like, how does this guy know Don't Look Down? And so I literally tracked him down on MySpace and was like, hi, I just discovered your podcast. How do you know Don't Look Down? and we had this conversation. Oh, I went to college in Philly, and like we started talking through that. And that was Jonathan, who's like kind of I have, I guess, technically 2 businesses, but he's one of my business partners now, like 15 years after the fact. But I started talking to him, and he's like, you should just start a podcast. Like, it's fun. That's what I did. I'm loving it. You should do it too. So for a couple of years, I kept doing these different podcasts with my old roommate Schropp. And it would be literally what I was already doing. We would take a camera and we would go to like live shows, and we would get permission to like interview the bands after the shows, and we would film it. And we would, there wasn't a YouTube yet. Or if there was, it was like very new. You weren't putting
very new
podcasts. So we literally, you would download the videos on iTunes. And by you would download, I mean I would download, because I'm pretty sure I was the only subscriber to the podcast. But like, we would do these like, I used to always say that I had done 19 podcasts before I had a good one, because we would do like 6 episode runs of a show, and then be like, this sucks, no one likes this, and then we'd give up, and then like a month or 2 later we'd feel the itch to do something else, and we would start a new thing. So we kept doing these little pet projects, and then I started doing the St. Mort show, and that was like kind of the first podcast that stuck. And I know, Anthony, you were on a couple episodes of the St. Mort show, and that evolved in a bunch of different ways. Like, the original idea is still, I think, a great idea for a podcast, but for someone way more ambitious than me, was that the St. Mort show was a fake late night talk show that I produced every week, that had 2 guests and a musical guest all in 45 minutes, with a series of fake commercials and an opening monologue. And it was so much work to produce that I think that format lasted about 20 episodes before I was like, I need to just sit down and talk to people, because this is like too much. And that was kind of my beginning in like interview shows, and it had its ups and downs. It was, back in those days, it was so hard to gauge listenership online. Like, iTunes was not letting you know what your listenership was like. I had no real way of knowing how well an episode was doing. So it was kind of a weird time to be a podcaster.
Right.
And I started using Reddit a lot more to promote my stuff. So I could like post interviews on there and see what happens. And that's kind of where the horror podcast all kicked off, was that I was doing the horror podcast, and I was doing St. Mort show, and I was on Reddit's horror page, and someone was like, we should start a movie club where we like watch a movie together. And I was like, we could turn it into a podcast. And we started this separate page on Reddit Horror Club, and we would let people pick movies, and we would discuss the movies. And I was producing the podcast with a friend, Miguel, who was my first like real co-host. And we did like maybe 50, 60 episodes before Miguel was like, I love doing this, but my schedule's too crazy. And through doing Reddit Horror Club, I had befriended these two dudes, Scott and Adam. And I was like, well, I'm just going to have Scott and Adam fill in then. And immediately there was like this chemistry. I was like, oh, okay, we got this. Like we were vibing. The only thing that sucked was that people wanted to talk about good movies, and we weren't having fun talking about the good movies nearly as much as we were having fun when the movie was awful. So we decided that we weren't going to do Reddit Horror Club anymore, and we were going to start our own thing, which was Horror Movie Night. And like, I don't know how the stars aligned on this, but we were one of the first podcasts to start utilizing SoundCloud at the time. So Geekscape had like gotten a deal with SoundCloud that like they were trying to break into podcasting. So they were giving us free premium accounts. But just like to me and the other two shows on the network. And our third episode of Horror Movie Night, SoundCloud put on their front page to promote that they had podcasts. So like we went from like our first two episodes had like maybe 200 listens to that episode had like 20,000 listens on it. And
there you go.
It just kind of, that was like, all of a sudden people knew who I was, and Horror Movie Night kind of was like the little engine that could. And we're getting near our 8th year of being a podcast. Literally next month, we're going to be recording episode 350. So like we were trucking along doing the show weekly. We've never missed a week. I'm very proud of that for us. But as I was doing Horror Movie Night, I started having these moments where I'd be like driving home from work and I'd have an idea for a podcast and I'd be like, you don't have time to do another podcast. I mean, now I'm the co-host of 6 podcasts that come out weekly. So like clearly I could do more than just one podcast. But that was right around in like 2019 was when I was starting to dip my toe into the idea of like, I could have a couple shows and I could produce some people's shows and I could do editing, and like that really blew open the floodgates even more. And like now, as big as Horror Movie Night was, now One Hit Thunder is almost a bigger show, which is crazy. And I mean, we just made enemies out of almost the entire country of Canada this past week with One Hit Thunder. So like, and that's unbelievable. And we're, One Hit Thunder is actually, don't want to get into too many details, but a fairly big podcast network has shown a lot of interest in bringing us on to their network. And, we're talking to some pretty well-established people in the comedy world that want to be a part of the show now. And
very nice.
Like things are just going really well with that show. So it's pretty dope. And, I've got all these other shows that I think are coming together really well. I have a new podcast I'm going to launch on April 1st, but I mean, I'll give you guys the exclusive on that bad boy.
Awesome.
It's going to be a Weird Al podcast that's hosted by myself and the bassist from the band Wheatus that did Teenage Dirtbag, and it's just us, and it's us like we're going to go song by song through his entire discography and rank our favorite songs. But I mean, we're talking about reaching out to like a lot of pretty well-established comedians and musicians that he knows through being part of Wheatus all these years. And I really think that show is going to pop off. And honestly, if it means that I get to meet Weird Al, like, heck yeah. Like that's like probably my number one celebrity I want to meet. So like,
I mean, from my visions of it, I know Weird Al has always been like one of your biggest influences. So
I did a whole set as Weird Al at a show.
Exactly,
one time.
I remember that. So that would be awesome if that would be a thing for you that actually came true for you. I know that would be like a big thing for you.
I wish I could remember who it was, because it was someone that I became really good friends with after the fact, but I didn't know them at the time, and they had just told me this. Oh God, it's going to drive me nuts. I don't remember who it is. If you're listening and you know that it's you, I'm really sorry. Remind me. But like, I'm friends with a bunch of people that I didn't know back when we were doing those shows, but now I know them better now. And one person was like, the first time I ever saw you, you were doing a Weird Al set at CN Skate Palace, and I came in, and he's like, I legitimately just thought someone was playing a Weird Al record. You sounded so much like him doing Amish Paradise. And I was like, thank you.
And you just sold it just to the fact that like you were definitely one of the guys like in those shows that like you were obviously not like the scene kids or the pop punk kids. You were just one man show and just totally from outfield, and you didn't care.
Yeah.
But it was just one of those things that, you know, you went up there, did your thing, and even though if somebody was like, where'd this all come from? I thought we were like seeing all these bands, and then you just see this one guy dressed up as Weird Al and then start doing a whole Weird Al thing, but not, like that was just you. And I think that's what just made you unique, and you were able to, and especially with the St. Mort stuff.
That was one of the biggest compliments I ever got was, you know, for a while, Aston Diner was a really great spot to hang out at night. But you would always see, like, if you were there on a certain night, you would always see the AA crowd roll in after their meeting at like at like 11 at night. And you know, being from Sun Valley, you would know a lot of the people that were rolling in that group, which like no shade. Like, hey, I applaud anybody who like gets themselves sober and gets themselves out of that dark place. That should be celebrated. But I remember there was a kid who like, I was never really bullied in high school. That was never like anything that happened with me, but I was kind of just like there. But this kid who was like kind of seen as a maybe more of an aggressive bully-ish type kid in my grade saw me sitting there, and he walked over and he just sat down next to me for a little bit, and he was like, hey man, I just got to tell you, I think about you a lot, man, because somehow we didn't know what we were supposed to be doing when we were 16, but you were so sure of yourself and who you were as a person, even as like a teenager. Like, I just think that's insane. And in my mind, I'm like, I didn't have any clue who I was. Like, but I think, like you said, I just kind of gave off that confidence of like, yeah, this is who I am. Like, take it or leave it, I guess.
Like, I was in band. I mean, I was in the band that I was at the time, but I wasn't at that point where I thought I could be up there by myself and doing something of that type of caliber. I would have been like, no, I'm definitely not. I'm cool with being.
Anthony, the secret was I couldn't get anyone to play the music with me. If I could have convinced someone to play bass and drums and do my weird stuff, I would have done it. But no one was willing to do it. So I was like, I know about 6 chords, but I can write 10 songs with them. So.
Right. And I think it's the fact that, you know, it was a beautiful thing back then because everybody was just wrapped up into bands, like, and like the scene, like we were saying when we were talking, the fact that we got to the point that around this area you had bigger bands that were you know, trying to come through Aston more than go to Philly.
Yeah, it was wild.
Was insane. You know, we had August Burns Red that came to the CN Skate House, which 4 Years Strong, which both those bands I deeply regret because now I'm a bigger fan of them now. Yeah. And looking back at that big flyer that they had on CN Skate House, I'm like, I really wish I would have seen them at their, like, you know, before they got successful.
I mean, I booked probably the coolest show I ever booked was the show that I booked with MC Lars. I'm not sure if were you at that one? It was at that I want to say it was the Beechwood Fire, whatever the fire hall was. On your way, like if you're driving to New Jersey, you pass it through.
I probably wasn't at that one then.
Yeah, no. I can't remember. Yeah, it was a bad area, but I did 3 shows there. And the last show that we did, MC Lars was the headliner. But
I think I remember the show. I just don't think I went.
We had booked Nitty Gritty, which was a rap group composed of dudes from the Kid Chris show. And they brought Donkey Lips from Salute Your Shorts to the show.
Yes,
and he gave my brother Brian an awful waffle in the middle of the show. It was wild, dude. Like, that was like one of those shows where it was like, we didn't have the world's biggest turnout, but like the people who went to that show still talk about that show.
Oh yeah. I mean, especially, the people that used to just hang out at the shows. And I mean, I wasn't at every single show, but you know, the shows that I would go to, you just saw the community of people and just it was a family to everybody.
Yeah. Well, and that's, I'll say like the two things that I'll pat myself on the back about a little bit is like, the Saint Mort thing, weirdly, like I watch some of the old videos still that I have of my sets, and it's like the fact that like you said, like it was all death metal bands. And I would just walk up there with an acoustic guitar and I would control that room. Like that room was actually paying attention to what was happening.
They really were. and it's not even funny. Like they would just be hearing, Miss Deed or Myself, My Enemy coming in and then the Saint Mort, and they would still be literally eyes glued on you. I'm like, I don't know this guy's not going to scream, right?
Yeah. Like, I don't know how that, but they were that was the best part, was they laughed. Like the jokes hit, like things that were supposed to be funny were funny. I could never do it again. Like I think back to it where I'm like, there was such a small window for what I was doing with Saint Mort to work. And like that window was basements in Aston circa 2006, 2008. Like it was not going to work anywhere else. But also like one of the things I was really proud of with Chords for a Cure, besides like raising all the money for charity that it did, was like, I feel like I have talked to so many people who have very distinct memories of Chords for Your Cure shows because there was always such a variety to the music when you would come to it.
Yes.
Because like, and this is I guess we have to blank out name, did amazing stuff with 610 Hardcore, right? Like he had built this whole community around this hardcore music scene and this metal and this deathcore and like all of that. But like with the Chords for a Cure stuff, I'd be like, I'm going to book 6 bands. Maybe one will be like this, Miss Deed band, but then Racing Kites is going to be on the exact same show, playing their pop punk stuff. And then I'm going to book Punchy's Pilot, which is just a dude with like an acoustic guitar and accordion that sings goofy songs. And
nobody would care.
No one would care. They were there for the show.
From each genre would be listening to each of those people. You wouldn't just be like, you would have the guys that are in the pits. They're like, oh, okay, well, this band ain't going to be, that crazy. So we're just going to go out and smoke and then they'll come back. But most of the people, they would watch one band, crowd around that band, next band would come on, that crowd would go right to the next one. I mean, it was almost like a miniature Warped Tour.
For sure. And I would bring in, like, I was the first person to book Team Goldie in Delco. I was the first person to book the Skylife in Delco. And like, man, these were bands.
These are so many memories. Jesus.
Yeah, but those were like bands that like, I brought them in and nobody really knew who they were. And then shortly after that, they were kind of the headliner at local shows. Like you would put Team Goldie as your closer because you knew that people were coming just to see Team Goldie.
Yeah.
So like it was kind of cool to see how that whole thing came to be, because we built, and I say we very, very meaningfully, like everybody, AJ, Matt, like I'll say his full name. He's not going to care. Matt Howard, like all of the dudes in Racing Kites, like those Schropp, like those dudes helped build a full functioning music scene that like was a living, breathing entity to a certain extent. And really like we did a lot of cool stuff. And like I remember one of the best bands. I was so bummed because it was kind of towards the tail end of the shows working out. I still sing the praises of the band March Hare. I'm not sure if you ever got to do a show with March Hare, Anthony. Did you?
I don't think so. I remember the band, but I don't think I'm not sure if Original Sins was still playing at that point.
If I had booked you with him, it would have been a Spoken Life set. For sure, because it was very late into it.
I'm not sure if I did I remember the name, but I'm not sure if we were on the same bill.
They were the most talented band I have ever had the pleasure of knowing. It was this 5-piece band from they all met at Tyler's art school in Philadelphia, and it was like this one dude who was a classically trained jazz drummer. They had a bassist who played like a 9-string, like slap funk bass. They had this other dude who had this guitar pedal board that was like the size of a kitchen table of effects that he would use. and then the other dude played guitar, and then he also had like a 3-stack like organ Moog keyboard set up. And then they
I'm
had
vaguely
this,
starting to remember.
and then
I
they
think
had
I
this
might
girl
have.
that played violin, and she was like an Asian girl with dreadlocks that played violin, and she was the screamer in the band. And all 5 of them sang and harmonized, and they did like this funky, like it was like disco mixed with funk mixed with like White Stripes playing death metal. Like it was this, I can't even begin to explain what it sounded like, but they were like one of those bands where I always have this memory of, I booked them on the same show as Racing Kites, and they started playing, and it was them right before Racing Kites. Racing Kites was obviously the last band of the night.
Yeah.
They started playing, and half the audience leaves to wait for Racing Kites to come on the stage. But Preston is standing front of the stage, just in awe.
Yes. I do remember. I think I vaguely remember a night where I might have been in. I might not have played, but I remember probably watching one of their sets, and I think everybody had. The memory that you're just mentioning.
It was at a skate park in Westchester. It was like next to a skate ramp, and Preston, when Racing Kites went on stage, the first thing he said was, "We shouldn't be playing last right now." Like he was like, that band should have been the headliner. That was one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. And he was like yelling at the audience. He's like, and shame on all of you for not watching what I just witnessed. Like,
I think I vaguely remember. I might have probably been at that show, and I remember Preston being right in front and watching those guys.
Yeah,
I don't remember him saying what he said, but I remember him just vaguely just being interested in watching those.
Well, guys. And now the lead singer of March Hare, Zach, is doing music with Emsley. Like they're collaborating on music together, and their music's like weird 9 Inch Nails industrial type stuff. It's really cool. Saint Mercury is what they record under.
Gotcha.
And that stuff's on Spotify. You want to check that out too. But yeah, it's I can't even begin to explain. It's weird to try to explain music on a podcast without playing the music. But like,
yeah,
it is. I have played that band for so many people because I'm just like, I've never heard a band sound like this before or after. Like it was such a unique sound, and they had such a good stage show. And I kick myself that band didn't exist at the peak of things, because I think that they could have been like the band in Delco that everyone unanimous, like they could have been like the Hey Hey, where like Hey was just like everybody loved Hey Hey for some like we all just agreed that this was like one of the best live bands. I think they went one step above Hey Hey when they became a band.
And I think kind of just wrapping this little memory-based stuff, but I think that's what made Chords for a Cure very unique, is because you brought bands like that you think people would be interested in, that you really liked. It just wasn't a general rock band or a general acoustic guy. You had a band that tried to mix 3 and 4 different genres together. And like people, like bands, like you said, like that March Hare, that nobody would never really think to listen to, but you discovered them. You're like, I got to get them on a show.
Yeah.
And I think you brought that to people. And I think that's why, it was such a fun time to really go to one of those shows, because you knew you were going to probably discover a new band or see a band that you would not necessarily see at another type of show.
Yeah. And I think that kind of continues with what I do even now with like the We Know podcasting stuff and with the Geekscape stuff, is like, I want to champion people like really bad. Like I have this weird thing where I bounce back and forth in my head of like, everybody who does stuff that they're passionate about, there's this point where you're like, I want to make this my career. But like, there's also that element where it's like, do I want to be like the most famous person for this thing? Or like, do I just want to be like the person who can pay their bills and like pay off their mortgage doing what they love? Right. Like, because those are two very different things. Keep in mind, being the most famous podcaster is very different from being a podcaster as a job. like those are two. Yeah. And the same with like being the most famous musician is very different from like, look, you can be a dude who plays guitar in a cover band and that plays all the bars 5 nights a week, and like your mortgage will be fine, your bills will be covered. But like that is very different than being Olivia Rodrigo. Like it's a very wide gap. And I kind of bounce back and forth between like, part of me is like, I am so happy with what I do. I love that, like, basically my full-time gig now is making podcasts, helping people with their podcasts. But there is that part of me that's like, I would love to be one of the most known people in podcasting, not even for selfish reasons, but because, like, if that would mean that I could tell people about these podcasts that I think are amazing that not enough people are listening to, and people would listen to me and like in mass check out that show, then like I would love to have that platform to be able to do that. And that's kind of like the mini version of Geekscape has just been me grabbing these like podcasters that I meet along the way that I'm like, this dude is so good at what he does. Like, that's how I found 91 Donkey Lane, which is going to forever be the show that I tell people to listen to. Like, listen to 91 Donkey Lane. It's amazing. They're about to have their 100th episode, or as they called it, their 25th episode. So like they are so funny. There's so much crazy additional work that goes into their podcast. We just added a show to the network called Undiscovered Scripts that I also am just like, everybody should be listening to this podcast. It's brilliant. It's a bunch of voice actors in LA. It's actually the woman who started the podcast is currently the voice of Barbie in every commercial. She's like the official Mattel licensed voice actor for Barbie. But she started this podcast with her other voice actor friends where they find scripts that were very well loved and award winning, but never got made. And they perform it as a radio play. And like, they have dug up some amazing scripts for this show so far. The first episode was called Back to the Future. And it was about a kid who is the world's biggest Back to the Future fan. His name is Marty. His parents met at the premiere of Back to the Future, and that's why they named him Marty as a tribute to their first date. And he sees a DeLorean at like this Back to the Future premiere. So he sneaks over at night to get a picture of himself in the DeLorean. And it turns out it's an actual working time machine. And he accidentally goes back in time to the making of Back to the Future, and he messes something up where the movie might not get made. So now he has to make sure the movie gets made so his parents go to the premiere and fall in love and he can be born. So it's like, it's just like them remaking Back to the Future, but on the set of the movie Back to the Future. It's so funny. It's so charming. And like the amount of Foley work that's in there with like the sounds of like the car revving up and like gunshots and chasing, like it's so well produced that I was just like, please be on our network. Like, more people should listen to this show. And if we can help even like 100 more people discover your podcast just because you're part of the Geekscape network, like I would love for them to be a part of it. So like, that's kind of been what I'm doing right now. But like I said, I'd love it to be on a bigger, grander scale where it's just like, hey, check out this show. And it's millions of people listening to me say like, check out these people. They're talented.
Yeah.
But
it's almost like a proud but never satisfied type of mindset that you love what you're doing, but you're always striving for more.
Yeah, and I mean, therapy is great because it keeps me in check with some of that stuff. Because that was my biggest. I went through depression for years, and one of the biggest things that would depress me sometimes was Chords for a Cure, because I could never be satisfied with what we raised. It was always, why didn't we raise more? And it's like, you know, the person who's getting a $300 check when they didn't have a $300 check before that show doesn't care that it wasn't $500. Only I do. Like, and that was the thing that I had to come to terms with, is like, celebrate the victories that you have instead of looking at every victory as a minor loss.
Right.
And it's tough to do because I think more people do it than are willing to admit it. Like, it's a lot easier to, it's something that I struggle with. I struggle with compliments. You know, someone compliments me, I always deflect. Like, no, that wasn't that great. And I've been working really hard on like actually accepting the compliments and being able to be like, yeah, that was really cool what we did back then. Like, that was, because I feel like I missed so much of it when we were in it. Like, when we were doing the music stuff, I wasn't appreciating what we were doing. And now 10, 15 years later, I'm looking back on it like, man, I really should have been more in the moment when that was all happening.
Right. Yeah. It's like you said, with especially a lot of those things, you don't know how much of an impact a lot of these things have made on a lot of people. Like we were saying earlier, that people still talk about the music scene back then, and it's a shame that it's like. And I've talked about this on my podcast, Table Talk. The fact that you don't see a lot of bands or like people that are into music that are coming out of high school anymore, like there was when we were in school. And I'm not sure if it's just a generation thing or anything, but it's like, we're still talking about it till this day, how much fun we had. But
I have a theory on it, and I'm working really hard on bringing back the Mount Hope Coffee House. That is like my biggest dream, is to get that back off the ground.
And that was a very nice time too. Yeah.
But I think that, like, let's say you are a 16-year-old kid and you have a guitar and you like playing guitar. If there's really nowhere for you to go and play, like, where's your motivation?
That's true.
To keep playing. And like, I remember Andrew Emsley told me this, but he was like, the Mount Hope Coffee House is where the DELCO music scene all started, because you had a bunch of dudes who played instruments, who showed up at this place every other Friday and met other dudes who had instruments. And then conversations started. And then it was like, he's like, that's how like his first band, Beyond Sunday, was literally formed by them going to the coffee house and meeting another guitarist and being like, hey, we should be an acoustic duo. And them like playing as an acoustic duo, and then meeting a dude who's like, hey, I'll play bass. And then like, slowly through doing that. So I think that it's just like, if you put the opportunity, it's the Field of Dreams philosophy. Like, if you build it, it'll grow. But like, if there's nowhere for anybody to go to show off that they can play an instrument, then how is anybody supposed to find anybody to form a band in the first place?
There you go. Yeah, it makes sense. Like you said, it is definitely not much of a local, place for a lot of people as there was before. So yeah, I mean, it makes sense. The fact that if you don't have somewhere to play,
like, look, I'm 36. I'm not in the mood to start throwing shows for high schoolers again. But like, if I can do the coffee house and that brings out a couple high schoolers and college kids, and like the next Matt Kelly shows up and wants to start doing, shows, I am more than happy to show them everything I used to do and help them avoid some of the pitfalls of the first couple years.
Yeah. But it's always good to, give back to, I would say giving back to the younger generation. Not that we're big phenom people of the local area, but like it's good to kind of give back to the younger generation, to if they're in that type of way, to, and then kind of show them how the ways that you learned, and if they're trying to run in your footsteps of that, so you can kind of just give them a little bit of a platform, a little bit of a way to be like, hey, this is how we started out, this is what we were doing. So I mean, if you're in that type of realm, this is a little bit of the playbook that you can go through.
Yeah, exactly.
Jim, is there anything is there another question we have for Matt before we possibly wrap up this interview?
I mean, there is the big one, which I'll save, because I've just been digesting you guys talking about music and bands and stuff, and I know that.
Show you the props that I pulled out. I found all 4 of my Sun Valley yearbooks.
Wow.
Wait. Stop it, because I literally on my way home from work tonight was like, fucking damn it, I wish that I had one of my yearbooks. But then in my head, I was like, any yearbook that I have, Matt had already moved on. Like I think I have a 6th or an 8th grade yearbook.
Oh no.
Who's that guy?
Well, one of them is me and one of them is my brother-in-law. Yeah, Matt, that slays me that you thought to grab the yearbooks, because at literally popped in my head, I was like, I wish that I could push my yearbook to the camera. And then I was like, wait, like mine and Anthony's senior yearbook wouldn't have you in it because you had already graduated.
I'd already
Our,
passed.
our 8th grade yearbook, you were already in 9th grade. And I was like, I don't know if I have, like, I know where those two are. They're in my room at my parents'. I don't know about anything other than that. Like, in my head, I was literally thinking the same thing. So,
well, get ready on that timestamp because a curse is about to come right now. But you want to know some whoopsie? I never won a single senior superlative. Not one. I was looking through this thing. I was like, nothing. I got nothing. Also, side note, I just opened up my yearbook and the very first senior signature I see says, "Dear Matt, you suck. Goodbye, Brian." Oh man, high school was awesome. But yeah, also like
high school.
These pictures. I was gonna try to throw up my senior photo. Man, the photos that they put of us are so small in here.
Yeah.
I thought that I feel like in my brain, I remember like, oh, when you're a senior, it's like 6 photos per page. So that it was like nice big photos, but man, they are like smaller than wallet size.
Smaller than a wallet size. And then spending that much money on getting those developed and everything to just have like this little bit of a picture on your yearbook.
No, it's not great, but yeah, I was in the running for so many senior superlatives. Like I remember I was up for most musically talented, which I think I would have said no to because that is not true. There was so many more musically talented kids in my grade. I was up for friendliest. Like I was.
Yeah, I don't even think I was in any of that.
I started, so I'm doing another podcast tomorrow night called High School Slumber Party, which is about reviewing teen flicks. But at the beginning, he asks people stuff like, what was your school mascot? Like, what was, did you win a senior superlative? So like to prep for it, I've been thinking about this stuff and I was like, I never got a senior superlative. Like I was like, I think I was more upset now than I was then.
The more funny thing will be trying to explain what a Vanguard is.
Well, that was the thing that I was excited to tell him was I was like, I'm excited to be like, we technically had 2 because we had the Vanguards and the Griffins. Like it did make sense why we had 2 mascots.
Yeah, it was
that were not too far off from each other. Like
I remember going to because I was in basketball most of my high school time, and I remember going to one school, and it wasn't a rival school. It wasn't. I think it was. Outside of our district area, and one of the guys comes out there. He's like, "So what the fuck is a Vanguard?" And we couldn't even describe what it was. Like we think it's an eagle.
Let me see,
but it's not an eagle.
I'm doing some low effort research here real quick. Vanguard.
I'll be laughing if there's literally a definition for a Vanguard.
Well, this is an advanced military guard, so I don't think that's the one we're looking for.
Nah, I don't think so.
Yeah, because technically our mascot was a Griffin, but we were the Sun Valley Vanguards, which didn't make sense. Did not connect.
Wait, like when we walked into Northley, though, they had like it looked like a Viking. Right? That was probably the Vanguard. So it's where did the Griffin come into the mix? Right?
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing.
Right.
Look, I don't have a lot of big requests or expectations in my life. But like I got 2 very, very achievable dreams, right? I want to be on the Sun Valley wiki page as a notable alumni of the school, and I'd like to be asked to do a commencement speech because of that. It's such a low bar. I realize that it is a very low bar. But I those are my goals: is to become at least big enough to get a mention on the Sun Valley wiki page.
And I think honestly, Matt, and just enjoying because I've been listening most of the time here. Just you saying I loved talking to people and I loved communicating, and the fact that you're doing something now that you're passionate about is something that I obviously jive with very, very well. I dance mostly through, or dance. I communicate mostly through my dancing, which is just body language. So me talking is not exactly my forte. So for me to be involved in a podcast now, it's very new territory for me. Obviously, I have this, which is producing great sound at this point. But I really wanted to just reflect on a couple of the things that you said, that you want to champion people, which is one of the biggest reasons why I teach, is I want to be able to, and like you said, you wanted to start the Mount Hope shows again so that you can inspire the next Matt Kelly to do what you did. That's like what I live for. I try to be like, okay, I want to elevate the next generation. And I've witnessed it, and it's very rewarding. And I also wanted to talk about, hey, I'm doing this because it pays the bills versus I want to be the best. Like, that's something that I challenge myself with all the time, especially in my field. It's you, like, to be a great teacher, to be a great dancer, and to be a great choreographer are all three very different things. And to be great at all of them is incredibly challenging, because you have to budget your time to be like, okay, if you want to be a great dancer, that is a very selfish thing that you have to focus on you independently. Teaching is a very selfless act in that you're passing on. Choreographing is kind of a blend of the two, where it's like, I'm challenging myself to be creative, but at the same time, I want to be able to pass this on to the people that are conveying the artistry that I see in my brain. So I toggle the three of them. And a lot of the times I just like shut myself down as the dancer, and I say, okay, well, the dancing thing is what's making me the money. The choreographing thing, I mean, I have my opportunities here and there, but it's not my breadwinner. Whereas this is the thing right here. Me being a professional dancer is like, I have very slim opportunities. And when I get them, I'm like, I'll take it. It's fine.
Yeah.
But that's also been because in the past 5 to 10 years, 10's a stretch. I'd say the past 5 years for sure, I haven't focused on myself as a dancer because I'm too busy doing this thing and this thing.
Well, the dancer world, one of the shows that I produce is a show called Before My Time with Gelsey Laurie. And I mean, if you like anything vintage, definitely check it out. But Gelsey's background is that her mom was a choreographer in Los Angeles and choreographed dances for a lot of movies and TV shows. And when she was 17, she packed up her things and moved to New York to try to make it as a dancer out there in Broadway. And, she auditioned for the Rockettes at one point. She was part of the touring cast of Rock of Ages. So like she did her stuff. She got noticed, ended up doing like years of cruise ships, and then was picked up by Cirque du Soleil and worked at Cirque du Soleil in Las Vegas for about 4 years.
Nice.
But she was saying, like, the dancer life, like living in New York, you're standing out in the cold in a skimpy dress at 5 a.m, hoping that you're one of the people that they even notice enough to bring into the warm building to audition to see if you get to audition for somebody else to maybe get selected for those. She's like, it's grueling. She's like, you have to be, every day you have to be so in shape and so ready to work no matter how sick you are, that like, she's like, it's not a great life. It's not a healthy lifestyle. Like there's a reason why like there's a lot of dancers who don't live to be very old because they aren't taking care of themselves in order to pursue that dream. So you're exactly right when you say like to pursue that dream of dance, like you are, it is both a selfish act and a selfless act, because you are actively choosing to really cut down the life that you have outside of the world of dance to succeed in that field. But I think that's why it's great that you do have these options. Like I hate the like idea of like those who can't teach. Like it's like, no, like that is such like a negative, pessimistic way to look at it. It's there are some people who absolutely can, who choose to teach, because the passion in them is so strong that, like you said, they want to pass it on to the next generation. They want to see the next. I want to see someone not just be the next Matt Kelly of the Delaware County music scene, but take it further than I could have ever dreamed of taking it. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's what I want to see. I don't need to be. I think it's funny that I've kind of relegated myself with podcasting a lot into the producer role, because it's like, I don't need to be on the mic. I like being on the mic. I enjoy, obviously, we've been talking for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
I have no problem talking into a microphone, even if it's 1 a.m. But I don't need to be. I'd rather, as long as I'm involved and I'm seeing someone create a product and I know that like I'm a piece of the team, then I'm happy. Like, I just want to, the joke is just like, I'm just happy to be considered. Like, I'm just happy to be here. Like, that's usually what it comes down to. That's why I say yes to almost anybody who wants me to be on their show, is like, hell yeah, let's talk. Let's do a podcast. It doesn't take a lot to put me in front of a microphone and get me talking.
Right. Well, Matt, we appreciate you for coming on board with us. The only last question that I really had for you is, where do you see yourself carrying on in the next 5 years, whether it be through podcasting world or I'd like to just document it right here on One Set, just like what your aspirations are, because that way, it's not a way that I'm cornering you and holding you accountable, but I have friends of mine and they're great friends of mine that are like, what do you want to do in the next 5 years? And it really puts into perspective for me, okay, am I just living life day by day, or am I actually working towards a goal that is outside of my comfort zone, but it's something that I yearn for? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I've been thinking about this for a while, actually. So what I would love is to no longer have any more, in 5 years, I would like to no longer have any of the part-time jobs that I'm working to keep everything afloat.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to be completely, fully self-sufficient exclusively on podcasting. I would like to no longer be editing anybody's shows but my own through We Know Podcasting. I want that to have grown to a point where I have hired people doing the editing and I'm just kind of managing the money and making sure that everyone's paid properly, and that is kind of just a nice little side gig over here. But in 5 years, I would like to be at the point where one or more of the podcasts, maybe it's One Hit Thunder, maybe it's a show that hasn't even been released yet, who knows, is big enough that I'm able to go on tours, that I'm able to do 2 weeks doing events, live venues, doing the podcast stuff, making people laugh, and getting my foot in the door producing docuseries based on the podcast that I do. A lot of the shows, when I come up with them, I think of what's the next step of this, and specifically with Horror Movie Night and One Hit Thunder, I have the idea for the docuseries inspired by the podcast. I want to kind of roll that out into the next thing. And then, if I get to a certain level, I'd love to direct at least one movie. I've had a script concept that I've been sitting on since high school that, it needs to be rewritten for the 20th time, because it's hasn't been touched since 2008. And I'm sure that the emotions don't ring true with me anymore. And I'd want it to be a personal story. But yeah, I've been writing and rewriting and writing and rewriting a script called Describing the Moon since 2004. So I'd love to one day make my version of that movie. And then I don't know, I'd love to do I have a lot of ideas for what would come next if we got there, but I don't think that would be feasible in 5 years. I think that what I've laid out is a feasible 5-year goal, and then we'll see what comes from that. But I guess that was the rambly version. The super short version is, I would love to be the next Judd Apatow in the world of podcasting. The way that Judd Apatow kind of, he would make one movie every 10 years, it felt like, but then he would pull together these up and coming voices and let them do these movies and they would become big hits. I want to do that with podcasting. I want to be kind of that name that when people hear that Matt Kelly's associated with a podcast, it makes them go, it's got to be kind of good. Matt Kelly wouldn't put his name on a bad product, and like they want to check it out.
Well, Matt, I think I can speak for Anthony and I collectively when I say we wish the best for you.
Thank you.
I
100%.
trust what you're doing. I thank you so much for being on here with us. Again, this is only episode 11 for us, so we're obviously a very, very young podcast, and I am obviously not seasoned in it. But thank you for sharing your story with us and your journey into podcasting and your aspirations moving forward. Anthony, any closing remarks on your end?
Matt, just want to say, like how Jim was saying, we are hoping and wishing all the best for you, and we know that you're working hard every day, and you're constantly at work. Thank you for joining us tonight. And any other things you want to plug before we get out of here, Matt?
Because I have so many shows, I always just say go to geekscape.net. They all live there. You'll find all the shows. Christmas 365, One Hit Thunder, Horror Movie Night, Before My Time with Kelsey Laurie. I also produce Popping Your Cherry with Mary Carey. And then check out weknowpodcasting.com. If you have a podcast that you need someone to do your editing for you, or maybe you need a new logo or theme song, we got you over there. And then it hasn't... the Weird Al podcast is coming very soon. Haven't established the RSS feed yet. Working on the logo this week, and then it'll get established. But keep an eye out for Weird Algorithm, which will be our Weird Al podcast.
Nice. This episode is brought to you by mathematics. Listen, if you think it's not important to know how to do math, you are incredibly mistaken. Listen, your parents put 1 and 2 together to make you, right? So so that was interesting.
Yeah.
It is Wednesday night, March 16th. We're at about 11:02 p.m. I just got in from teaching. About almost, I'd say 22 hours ago, because it was close to 1 a.m. when we were wrapping up, or maybe 2 a.m. when we were wrapping up with Matt. Both Anthony and my internet servers just died out on us.
Totally just died. Just like,
nope. You're not wrapping up this episode, which we were not, like 60 to 90 seconds from ending the episode in general.
Thankfully, we were pretty close to just getting done. So we didn't have to redo. And thankfully, Matt being the powerhouse that he is, he was able to help us get our files. And thankfully, we didn't have to redo. So again, we want to give a shout out again to Matt Kelly for, being our guest. And it was a great time. We got to, chat with him about, podcasting, his background in podcasting. We did a little bit of wrestling talk, which, was fun. And, just shooting around, talking. And, if you guys, again, all his links will be in the description of this video. And if you're listening on Spotify, it's in the description as well. So make sure you check out Matt. And if any of you guys are watching and are podcasters and are interested in his services, feel free. We don't get any, affiliates with it. We're just, helping out a brother in hand with, shouting out and promoting our friends. So make sure you go support him. And so this is going to be a little quick intro or outro intro. But yeah, we want to say thank you guys again for, tuning in. This has been the One Set podcast. Make sure you guys are following us on Facebook and Instagram, YouTube at One Set Pod, and make sure you guys are giving us a rating and review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You can also find us on Anchor, and we would love to have you guys join our journey as podcasters and become new One Set fans. So, Jim, brother, anything else you got for us?
I just wanted to conclude the episode and kind of delve back into, and again, I know that we wanted to keep this under 5, and this is going to be quick. I think that the most that I took from Matt, he's such a good dude.
Yes.
Is that he is out here wanting to help other people. He's for the betterment of community, which I think you and I are both in the same boat with that.
Yes. Absolutely.
So if you're out here listening and you're a selfish asshole, teach their own, but that's not who we are. We are out here to try to further the growth of the life around us and the world around us, right?
Right.
And I think that like having Matt on and being able to chat with him, it was just a true testament to recognizing, like, yeah, he's my kind of people.
Yeah,
and he's your kind of people too, and
absolutely,
he's our kind of people. So Matt, thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Okay, I think that's a wrap, brother.
That's a wrap, guys. This has been One Set. I am Anthony Irvin. My co-host Jim Green. Thank you guys for sticking with us for another episode. We will see you guys on another episode of One Set. See you guys later.
Until next time.